7:21 in the morning, the Gulf of Oman. Two F-22 Raptor stealth fighters banked sharply toward the Iranian coastline. This was not a routine intercept. The contact on their screens was moving with a kinematic profile that suggested something far more advanced than the aging interceptors usually seen in this sector. The question for the American pilots was simple. Had the intelligence reports missed a major upgrade in the region, or was this a deliberate provocation? The morning sun caught the edges of the titanium airframes. Below, the sea was a vast sheet of dark glass. The air at 40,000 feet was thin and freezing. Inside the lead cockpit, Major Elias Thorne checked his primary sensor display. His call sign was Vader. He adjusted his oxygen mask and felt the slight pressure of the G-suit against his legs. Major Thorne spoke into his radio. Control, Raptor 1-1. Target is accelerating. We're at Mach 1.5 and losing ground. The voice of the controller at the Combat Information Center came back through the headset. Raptor 1-1. This is Guardian. We see the climb. You are cleared to intercept and identify. Do not cross the 12-mile limit. Thorne glanced at his wingman, flying 2 miles to his right. The second F-22 fighter was a silent shadow against the deep blue sky. They were the most advanced air superiority assets in the world. Usually, their presence alone was enough to make an intruder turn back. Today, the intruder was climbing higher. 7:24 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of the lead Iranian Su-35, the pilot tightened his grip on the stick. He knew the Americans were in the area. His digital display did not show them, but his tactical training told him they were close. The Russian-made Sukhoi was a powerful machine. It was fast and agile. He felt the vibration of the twin engines through his seat as he pushed the throttles into afterburner. He was not here to start a war. He was here to show that the sky no longer belonged to only one side. The Iranian pilot looked at his fuel state. He had enough for a high-speed dash. He pulled the nose up. The aircraft groaned under the stress of the maneuver. He watched the altitude numbers scroll rapidly on his head-up display. 50,000 feet. 55,000 feet. He was entering the thin air where only the best engines could breathe. 7:27 in the morning. Major Thorne watched the target on his glass cockpit display. The contact was now at Mach 1.8. It was a staggering speed for a regional aircraft. Thorne keyed his radio again. Control, Raptor 1-1. Target is performing a high-altitude zoom climb. I am committing to the intercept. The controller responded. Confirm. You are cleared for a visual identification. Warning, we have detected a second contact. Lifting off from Bandar Abbas. You may be entering a multiple target environment. Thorne felt a spike of adrenaline. A second aircraft meant a coordinated formation. He signaled his wingman to split their search patterns. The F-22 fighters separated. One went high, one stayed low. They were using their stealth to create a trap. They wanted to see what the intruder would do when it realized it was being boxed in. The lead Su-35 leveled off at 60,000 feet. The sky here was almost black. The pilot scanned the horizon. He saw a glint of silver far to his left. It was a moment of pure focus. He turned his aircraft toward the glint. He was now on a direct collision course with the American formation. The morning was still quiet. It would not stay that way. 7:30 in the morning. High over the Gulf of Oman, Major Thorne pushed his Raptor closer. He did not use his radar. That would give away his exact position. Instead, he relied on the passive infrared sensors of the F-22. The image on his screen sharpened. It was a twin-engine fighter with a heavy, muscular frame and long, raked wings. Thorne spoke into his mask. Guardian, Raptor 1-1. Positive identification. Target is a Sukhoi 35 Flanker-E, Iranian markings. He is carrying a full air-to-air loadout. The controller responded immediately. Copy. Raptor 1-1. Be advised. The second contact is 5 miles behind the leader. He is climbing fast. You are authorized to issue a radio warning on the International Guard frequency. Thorne adjusted his flight path. He was now less than 1 mile. from the Iranian lead aircraft. He was positioned slightly below and behind the Sukhoi. In this position, he was invisible to the Iranian pilot. He flipped a switch on his communications panel. Unknown aircraft on heading 180. You are approaching a restricted operations area in international waters. Alter your course to the south or you will be intercepted. 7:33 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of the lead Sukhoi 35, Captain Abbas Rezai felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cockpit temperature. He heard the American voice in his headset. It was clear and calm. He looked at his radar warning receiver. It was silent. There was no electronic signature of a radar locking onto him. Rezai looked out of his canopy. He turned his head left, then right. The sky appeared empty. He knew the Americans used stealth technology, but seeing the empty sky while hearing a voice that sounded like it was right next to him was unsettling. He was flying one of the most advanced fighters in the Iranian inventory. His sensors should have seen something. Rezai keyed his radio. American aircraft. I am in international airspace. I am conducting a sovereign patrol. You are the intruder. Identify yourself. Major Thorne did not answer. Instead, he applied a touch of power. He pulled the Raptor up until he was flying directly alongside the Sukhoi. He was only 50 feet away. For the first time, the two pilots made eye contact. 7:36 in the morning. Captain Rezai gasped. The gray, angular shape of the F-22 seemed to materialize out of the blue haze. It was a predatory silhouette. The Raptor was so close that Rezai could see the unit patches on the American pilot's flight suit. Inside the American cockpit, Thorne watched the Iranian pilot. He saw the man's head snap toward him. He saw the Sukhoi wobble for a fraction of a second as the pilot reacted in surprise. It was a dangerous moment. At Mach 1.2, any sudden movement could cause a mid-air collision. Thorne spoke calmly. Control. I have made visual contact. The pilot is aware of my presence. He is holding steady. Copy. Raptor 1-1, the controller replied. Warning. The second Sukhoi is closing the gap. He is moving into a firing position behind your wingman. Brake left. Brake left now. The Iranian wingman was not interested in a peaceful intercept. He had seen his leader being shadowed, and he was moving to intervene. The air was no longer empty. It was becoming crowded. The Sukhoi 35 lead pilot made his choice. He did not turn away. He pulled his stick hard to the left, banking his heavy fighter directly into the path of the Raptor. 7:40 in the morning. Major Thorne reacted instantly to the sudden movement of the Iranian fighter. He pulled his stick back and rolled the Raptor away from the silver wing of the Sukhoi. The wake turbulence from the heavy Iranian jet shook his airframe. It was a deliberate act of aggression, a thumping maneuver designed to disrupt the flight of an interceptor. Thorne spoke into his radio. Control. Raptor 1-1. Lead target is maneuvering aggressively. I have been forced to defensive. Stinger. Check your 6 o'clock. His wingman, Captain Sarah Stinger Vance, responded. Raptor 1-2. I see him. The wingman is trying to get a nose-on solution. I am braking high. The second Iranian Sukhoi 35 was not playing a game of observation. He was flying a high-alpha maneuver. He used his thrust vectoring nozzles to pivot the nose of his aircraft toward Vance's Raptor. It was a display of extreme agility. On the American displays, a yellow warning light began to flash. The Iranian pilot had turned on his fire control radar. 7:43 in the morning. Inside the Iranian Air Defense Command Center in Bandar Abbas, the atmosphere was electric. Operators sat in front of glowing screens, watching the digital dance of 4 high-speed contacts. The commander, Brigadier General Mansour, watched the primary radar feed. He saw the American fighters blinking in and out of the display. Their stealth coatings made them difficult to track, but the Sukhois were providing real-time data. The radio operator spoke. General. Captain Rezai reports the Americans are refusing to leave the corridor. He is requesting permission to transition to a combat posture. Mansour hesitated. He knew that a single missile launch would change everything, but he also knew that if his pilots were humiliated, the message of strength would be lost. Mansour spoke into the microphone. Tell Rezai to hold. Use the radar to paint them. Force them to break away. Do not fire unless they cross the 12-mile line. 7:45 in the morning. High above the water, the situation reached a new level of danger. Major Thorne saw his radar warning receiver light up in red. A spike sound echoed in his headset. It was a continuous tone. The Iranian wingman had achieved a temporary radar lock on his wingman. Thorne keyed his radio. Control. Guardian. We are being painted. Requesting permission to return the lock. The controller's voice was tense. Raptor 1-1. Negative. Do not illuminate. Use your passive systems. We are monitoring the signal. If they launch, you are cleared to engage under the self-defense protocol. Inside his cockpit, Captain Rezai watched the Raptor in front of him. He saw the American jet climb vertically. It was a move that would stall any other aircraft. But the Raptor kept going. It seemed to defy gravity. Rezai felt a sense of professional respect. He knew the machine he was facing was superior in technology, but he believed his skill could bridge the gap. Rezai spoke to his wingman over their private link. Stay on him. Do not let the second one disappear. If we lose sight of them, we lose the fight. The two Iranian fighters began a coordinated pincer movement. They were trying to force the Raptors toward the Iranian coastline. If the Americans crossed into sovereign airspace while under a radar lock, the legal justification for an engagement would shift. Thorne looked at his tactical map. The 12-mile line was only 20 miles away. At their current speed, they would reach it in less than a minute. Thorne's voice was a low growl. Stinger. They are pushing us toward the line. We are not going to let them. 7:48 in the morning. Major Thorne pushed his throttles forward into the military power range. He did not use afterburners. He did not need them. The F-22 began to supercruise, accelerating past Mach 1.4, without the telltale infrared signature of a glowing exhaust. He needed to break the geometry the Iranians were trying to establish. Thorne spoke to his wingman. Stinger. Execute the split. I will take the high orbit. You go dark. Captain Vance responded. Copy. Going dark. Vance adjusted her flight path, dipping her nose and diving toward the thicker air near the surface of the water. At the same time, she changed her aircraft's orientation to minimize its radar cross-section. On the Iranian radar screens, her contact began to flicker, and then vanished completely. She was still there, but to the foreign sensors, she had become part of the background noise of the ocean. 7:50 in the morning. Inside the Combat Information Center of the American Carrier Strike Group, the tension was rising. A senior controller pointed to a new set of data points on the long-range scan. The controller spoke into the command net. Guardian, we have 2 additional fast movers launching from JASC. They are designated Bogey 3 and Bogey 4. Profile matches more Sukhoi 35s. They are vectoring to intercept the Raptors from the northeast. The foreign strategy was becoming clear. They were not just shadowing the Americans. They were attempting a 4-ship envelopment. They wanted to surround the 2 Raptors with 4 superior maneuverability fighters. It was a classic box maneuver. Inside the cockpit of the 3rd foreign Sukhoi, the pilot checked his data link. He saw the position of his leader, Captain Rezai. He also saw the empty space where the 2nd American fighter had been just moments before. He was confused. The Americans were playing a game of hide-and-seek that his training had not fully prepared him for. The 3rd pilot spoke to Rezai. Leader, I have lost the 2nd contact. I am scanning the lower sector. Nothing. Rezai's voice was strained. Keep your eyes open. They are here. They want us to look at the sky so we do not see the water. 7:52 in the morning. Major Thorne watched the tactical situation develop on his integrated electronic display. He saw the 2 new Su-35s closing in. He was now at 55,000 feet, looking down on the entire engagement. To the foreign military, he was a lone contact. They did not know where Vance was. Thorne waited until the 2 new foreign jets were within 30 miles. Then, he performed a high G-roll and dove. He was not diving toward the foreign forces. He was diving toward a patch of empty sky. Suddenly, Captain Vance reappeared on the Iranian screens. She was no longer low over the water. She had used her speed to climb behind the two new foreign arrivals. At the same moment, Thorne's contact vanished from their screens as he adjusted his angle. The foreign pilots were now spinning their heads. The Americans were appearing and disappearing like ghosts. One moment they were in front. The next, they were behind. The tactical advantage had shifted. The hunters were starting to feel like the hunted. Rezai shouted into his radio, "Brake! Brake! He is on your 6!" The morning air was filled with the electronic screams of radar warning systems. Both sides were now fully committed to a struggle for position. No one had fired, but the safeties were off. 7:55 in the morning. The coastline of Iran was no longer a distant abstraction. It was a jagged brown line on the horizon. Major Thorne felt a new vibration in his headset. It was a rhythmic, chirping sound. It was different from the Sukhoi radars. This was a ground-based tracking system. A long-range surface-to-air missile battery had found him. Thorne keyed his radio. "Control, Raptor 1-1. I am being spiked by a long-range ground radar. Signal is high power. They are looking for a firing solution." The controller's voice was urgent. "Raptor 1-1. We confirm. Our sensors show a Bavar-373 battery is active at Bandar Abbas. You are currently 15 miles from their territorial waters. If you close to 12 miles, we expect a launch." Thorne checked his tactical display. The 4 Iranian Su-35s were tightening their circle. They were no longer trying to intercept. They were herding the Raptors toward the missile engagement zone. It was a sophisticated trap. If the Raptors turned to engage the Sukhoi, they would drift over the 12-mile line and be shot down by the ground battery. If they stayed on course, the Sukhoi would eventually have a clear shot at their tailpipes. 7:58 in the morning. Inside the lead Sukhoi, Captain Rezai saw the data on his screen. The ground batteries were now providing a high-fidelity track. He did not need to use his own radar anymore. He could see exactly where the American was. The ground-based radar was effectively acting as a flashlight in a dark room, and the Raptor was the shadow. Rezai adjusted his weapon select switch. He moved it to the medium-range missile setting. A red circle appeared on his head-up display. It was centered on the American Raptor. He felt the weight of the moment. He was less than 60 seconds away from a potential engagement. His hand was steady, but his breathing was heavy inside the mask. Rezai spoke to his formation. "We have the track. Move to the final intercept point. They have nowhere to go. Prepare to engage on my command." 8 o'clock in the morning. The 2 Raptors were now bracketed. 4 Sukhoi fighters were in the air around them. A missile battery was locked onto them from the shore. The digital screams of the radar warning receivers were constant. Major Thorne looked at his fuel and his weapon status. He was at the edge of the envelope. The F-22 was the most capable fighter in the world, but even a Raptor could not fight a mountain of missiles and 4 agile interceptors at the same time. Thorne spoke to his wingman. "Stinger. We are at the decision point. Prepare for a high-G break. If that ground radar transitions to a continuous wave signal, we are going kinetic. We will take the lead pair first." Captain Vance responded. "Copy. My finger is on the button. I am ready." The sky was bright and the air was clear. The sensors of both nations were at their limits. Every pilot in the air knew that the next few seconds would determine if they returned to base or became part of a new and terrible history. 8:01 in the morning. The ground signal changed. It was no longer a chirp. It was a scream. The Bavar-373 battery had transitioned to terminal guidance. The radar was no longer searching. It was guiding a ghost missile toward a calculated point in the sky. Major Thorne's voice was ice. "Control. Raptor 1-1. I am spiked. Terminal guidance. I am committed." He flipped the master arm switch to arm. On his glass display, the weapon icons turned from green to red. The internal weapons bay doors cycled a fraction of an inch. They were ready to snap open in less than a second. Inside the bay, the AIM-120D missile was primed. Its onboard radar seeker was already slaved to the target data. "Stinger," Thorne commanded. "Go active. If they launch, we clear the sky." 8:02 in the morning. Captain Vance engaged her primary radar. The stealth advantage was now secondary to survival. She flooded the sky with high-frequency energy. On the Iranian displays, her contact exploded into a bright, solid diamond. Inside the lead Sukhoi, Captain Rezai saw the Raptor's bay doors twitch on his infrared track. He knew that signature. It was the last thing many pilots ever saw. "He is opening!" Rezai shouted. "Engage! Engage!" The second Sukhoi pilot pulled hard. 9 Gs. He threw his aircraft into a violent, vertical spiral. He was trying to get a heat-seeking lock. He wanted a Fox 2 solution. The Raptor's engines were shielded, but at this range and at this speed, the thermal bloom was unavoidable. A high-pitched, metallic growl filled the Iranian wingman's headset. The missile seeker had it. He had a solid lock on the second American fighter. His thumb moved to the launch button on the stick. 8:0 to 3 in the morning. 4 fighters. 1 goal. Survival. Thorne had the lead Sukhoi in his sights. The digital diamond was steady. It did not flicker. The fire control computer calculated the probability of a kill. 95%. Stinger. Take the wingman. I have the leader. On my mark. Locked, Vance replied. Her voice was a flat line. There was no fear, only the physics of the intercept. The world narrowed to the size of a cockpit display. The sky was no longer a place of flight. It was a grid of lethal vectors. 1 second, 2 seconds. The pilots on both sides held their breath. The triggers were halfway pulled. The vacuum of the weapons bays prepared to meet the rush of the slipstream. Then, 8:0 to 4 in the morning. A new contact appeared on every radar screen simultaneously. It was not a stealth fighter. It was not a fast mover. It was a massive, slow-moving bloom of electronic energy descending from 35,000 feet. It was directly in the middle of the engagement zone. The voice of the American controller at Guardian broke the silence. Raptor 1-1. Brake lock. Brake lock now. We have a civilian track. Dubai. Flight 780 has suffered a total navigation failure. They are drifting into the corridor. Major Thorne looked at his tactical display. The massive icon of the civilian Airbus was less than 10 miles away. It was a metal wall moving at 500 miles per hour. It was positioned exactly between the Raptors and the Iranian missile battery. If the Bavar-373 battery fired its missiles now, the radar would likely lock onto the largest target. 300 civilians would be the first to die. 8:0 to 6 in the morning. Inside the Iranian command center, Brigadier General Mansour stood up. He looked at the same data. The civilian airliner had ignored the restricted airspace warnings. It was a ghost in the machine. Mansour grabbed the radio. Rezai, disengage. The Americans are not the target. Protect the corridor. If that battery fires, it will hit the transport. Shut down the tracking radar. Now. Inside the Sukhoi, Captain Rezai saw the massive shape of the airliner through his canopy. It was a white speck against the blue, growing larger every second. He realized the horror of the situation. His wingman was still holding a lock on the American wingman. The missiles were designed to seek the strongest return. The Airbus was a beacon. Rezai spoke to his wingman. Turn off your radar. Break away. Now. 8:0 to 7 in the morning. The high-pitched scream of the radar warning receiver in Major Thorne's headset suddenly stopped. The ground-based radar had gone dark. The Iranians had realized the danger, but the danger was not over. The airliner was still descending. It was heading straight for a collision. With the second Iranian Sukhoi, Thorne saw the geometry. The Iranian pilot was looking at the Raptor. He was not looking behind him. Thorne keyed his radio to the international frequency. He did not care about protocol anymore. Dubai 780. This is an American military aircraft. Pull up. Pull up immediately. You are entering a restricted combat zone. Turn left, heading 200. There was no answer from the airliner. Their radios were silent. 8:0 to 8 in the morning. Major Thorne and Captain Rezai were no longer enemies. They were two pilots looking at a catastrophe. The aggressive maneuvering had stopped. The 4 fighters were now orbiting the massive civilian plane. Thorne looked across the sky. He saw the lead Sukhoi. The Iranian pilot was waving his wings. It was an old signal. It meant, "Follow me." Rezai was attempting to lead the blind airliner away from the coast and the missile batteries. Thorne spoke to his wingman, "Stinger, join on the Sukhois. We are going to form a corridor. We shepherd them out of here. No one fires. No one locks." The pivot was complete. The hunt had turned into a rescue. The most advanced weapons in the world were now being used as signal flares for a lost civilian crew. 8:10 in the morning. The air around the civilian airliner became a crowded and dangerous intersection. Major Thorne and Captain Vance moved their Raptors into position on the left wing of the massive Airbus. On the right, Captain Rezai and his wingman leveled off their Sukhois. 4 of the most lethal aircraft in the world were now flying in a tight diamond formation around 300 unsuspecting passengers. The silence on the radio was absolute. There were no orders from the controllers that could cover this scenario. The pilots were operating on instinct and professional tradition. Thorne looked across the roof of the airliner. He could see the camouflaged paint of the Iranian Sukhois. The Iranian-led pilot, Rezai, was looking back at him. Thorne raised a hand in a brief, professional salute. He then pointed forward and began a slow, deliberate bank to the south. He was showing the way. 8:12 in the morning. Inside the cockpit of the Dubai Flight 780, the pilots were struggling with a catastrophic electrical failure. Their primary displays were black. Their long-range radios were dead. They were flying on standby instruments, unaware that they had drifted 30 miles off course and into the heart of a mounting international crisis. The first officer looked out of the side window and froze. "Captain, look left." The captain leaned over. He saw the gray, jagged shape of an F-22 Raptor less than 50 feet from his wingtip. He looked to the right. He saw the twin tails and massive engines of an Iranian Su-35. The civilian captain did not understand the geopolitics of the moment. He only saw 4 Guardians. He saw the American pilot pointing toward the open sea, away from the invisible line of the Iranian coast. He saw the Iranian pilot nodding in agreement. 8:14 in the morning. Major Thorne watched the airliner's control surfaces move. The big plane began to bank. It was a sluggish, heavy movement, but it was heading in the right direction. They were moving away from the 12-mile limit. They were moving out of the kill zone of the Bavar-373 missile battery. Thorne spoke to his wingman. "Stinger. He is responding. Keep the formation tight. We stay with him until he clears the Iranian sector." Captain Vance responded. "Copy. The Iranian wingman is drifting a bit. I think he is running low on fuel." Indeed, the high-speed pursuit and the aggressive maneuvers had drained the internal tanks of the Sukhois. The Iranian jets were powerful, but they lacked the fuel efficiency of the Raptors at these altitudes. Captain Rezai knew he had only minutes left before he would be forced to return to base on emergency reserves. 8:15 in the morning. The formation crossed the 30-mile mark from the coast. The threat from the ground-based radar had faded to a dull hum on the warning receivers. The immediate danger of a mistaken shoot-down had passed. Captain Rezai pulled his Sukhoi slightly ahead of the airliner. He looked back one last time at the American Raptors. He did not use his radio. He did not need to. He dipped his wings sharply to the left and then to the right. It was the universal signal for "I am departing." The 2 Iranian fighters broke away in a steep dive, heading back toward Bandar Abbas. They had stood their ground. They had shown their teeth. And in the end, they had chosen the same path as their rivals. Thorne watched them go. He felt a strange sense of relief. The dogfight that almost started a war had ended in a shared mission of mercy. "Guardian." Thorne called out to the controller. "The bogies have departed the area. We are escorting the civilian track to the edge of the Dubai Flight Information Region. The situation is stable." The morning sun was now high in the sky. The tension remained, but the triggers were no longer being squeezed. 8:20 in the morning. Major Thorne watched the 2 Iranian Sukhois shrink into small gray dots against the haze of the coastline. The threat was gone, but the adrenaline remained. His heart was still hammering against his ribs. He adjusted his focus back to the massive white wing of the airliner. "Raptor 1-2. Thorne called out. Keep a 5-mile cushion. We do not want to spook their flight deck any more than we already have. Let them breathe. Captain Vance pulled her fighter into a wider orbit. Copy, lead. They are holding heading 200. Altitude is steady at 24,000 feet. It looks like they have regained some manual control. The transition from a high-stakes intercept to a protective escort was jarring. Just minutes ago, Thorne had been ready to release an AIM-120 missile into the cockpit of the man who had just saluted him. The professional respect he felt for the Iranian pilot was complicated. They were both pawns in a much larger geopolitical game, yet for a few minutes, they had been the only two people capable of preventing a massacre. 8:25 in the morning. Inside the American Combat Information Center, the atmosphere had shifted from a war footing to a diplomatic scramble. Senior officers were already on secure lines to the State Department. The radar logs were being backed up. Every second of the encounter had been recorded by the Raptors' sophisticated sensor suites. The controller's voice returned to Thorne's headset, now sounding exhausted. Raptor 1-1. Be advised. We have established contact with Dubai Air Traffic Control via landline. They are aware of Flight 780's situation. An emergency secondary escort is launching from Al Minhad. You are cleared to RTB once you are relieved. Copy, Guardian, Thorne replied. We are staying on station until the handoff is complete. We have plenty of gas. 8:28 in the morning. The relief arrived in the form of 2 UAE Air Force F-16s. They approached from the west, their colorful markings a sharp contrast to the low visibility gray of the Raptors. Major Thorne watched the handoff with a sense of detachment. The crisis was moving out of the tactical realm and into the world of paperwork and high-level debriefs. Thorne glanced at his fuel gauge. He had enough for a comfortable return to his base, but the mental fatigue was setting in. The mission had lasted less than an hour, but it felt like a lifetime. 8:30 in the morning. The 2 F-22s banked away from the airliner, climbing high into the thin, cold air where they were most comfortable. They left the Gulf of Oman behind, heading back toward their desert base. Thorne looked back at the Iranian coast one last time. The radar warning receiver was quiet. The sky was empty again. The encounter would soon be analyzed by intelligence agencies across the globe. They would look at the speeds, the turn rates, and the electronic signatures. But they would never see the moment of eye contact between two pilots, who had decided, for one morning, that the world had seen enough fire. Stinger, Thorne said quietly over the squadron net. Nice work today. You too, boss, Vance replied. Let's go home. The sky was a perfect, indifferent blue. The ghosts of the dogfight were already fading. 10 hours later. Al Dhafra Air Base. Major Thorne sat in a windowless room. The air thick with the smell of stale coffee and the hum of high-powered servers. In front of him, 3 intelligence officers from the National Air and Space Intelligence Center studied a wall of monitors. They were not looking at the sunset. They were looking at the raw data harvested from the Raptor's sensors during the 7 minutes of the near engagement. One of the analysts pointed to a waveform on the screen. The Su-35's radar signature is different from the Russian baseline. The Iranians have integrated their own electronic warfare suite. They were able to pulse gate our passive sensors for 3 seconds. That should not be possible. Thorne rubbed his eyes. The adrenaline had long since evaporated, replaced by a heavy, bone-deep exhaustion. They were fast, he said simply. And they were professional. They didn't panic when we went dark. They knew exactly where the line was. 3 days later. Washington, District of Columbia. The Pentagon issued a brief, 4-paragraph statement regarding a routine maritime intercept in the Gulf of Oman. It mentioned that American aircraft had assisted a civilian airliner with a navigation failure. There was no mention of radar locks. There was no mention of the Bavar-373 missile battery. In Tehran, the official news agency released a photo of Captain Rezai receiving a commendation for securing sovereign airspace. The caption did not mention the American Raptors. It did not mention the civilian lives saved. In the world of high-stakes geopolitics, the truth of the encounter was too dangerous to be made public. Strategic assessment. Military analysts would later study the telemetry of this classified dogfight as a turning point in regional air power. The encounter proved that the gap between 5th-generation stealth and advanced 4th-generation interceptors was narrowing. The Iranian Su-35s had demonstrated that with the right ground support and tactical coordination, they could challenge the most advanced aircraft in the world. But the real lesson was not found in the technical data. It was found in the restraint shown at the edge of the abyss. Both nations had invested billions of dollars in weapons designed to kill with clinical efficiency. Yet, when the moment of truth arrived, the human element had overridden the machine. The incident report, filed by Major Thorne, remains classified at the highest level. Only one side filed a report at all. The Iranians chose to act as if the Americans were never there. It was a silent acknowledgement that both sides had peered over the edge and decided they were not ready for what came next. The Gulf of Oman is quiet today. The sun still catches the edges of silver wings, and the radars still chirp in the darkness. But for 4 pilots, the sky will never look the same. They know how close the world came to breaking, and they know that the next time, the ghost in the machine might not be a civilian airliner. Modern warfare is a game of inches and milliseconds. Sometimes, the greatest victory is the battle that is never fought.